Hey everyone, welcome back and thank you for being here. I have been on a hike today, not very far from the campground, but I also haven't eaten. It's 2:30. I recorded one lecture earlier, and I wanted to do another one. It's just so hot, it's like the UV's crazy, so we didn't make our way back. We found the shade and just kind of hung out and stared at the lake for a while. But I also wanted to, instead of putting that behind me, I wanted to give you guys a taste of some of the rocks and dirt that's also here. Pretty standard New Mexico features. Shrubbery. There's some really beautiful flowers, really tiny flowers, like small buds on very short plants. Like they look mostly green, but they have just the very tinge or tip of purple usually. And there's some orange released. Just really bright colors in general, lots of contrast between the colors. This is the video for the New Mexico, Texas event that I went to this year. I received funding for that from Lone College Montgomery. They also funded some aspects of the Pacific ABA event that I went to and the North Texas Philosophical Association event that I went to. And I'm really grateful for all of that, and part of the funding was sharing some kind of educational resource with my colleagues. So I wanted to share some of what I've learned and recap what happened at the event, what I did. I didn't just present, I also moderated and commentated. And I started the Pacific APA event with North Texas went really smoothly, except for the fact that I guess what I say, if I didn't include this in the video, what I'd say I learned at North Texas is to always show up on the first day if possible. Even if you don't present until the second day, just try to show up, and I found that I really like being in the company of other philosophers. Go figure. It really makes sense. It feels like being around really good people who are interested in just your life and want to tell you about their life a little bit. So I always enjoy these conferences. And on that one, I showed up late. I didn't show up late to anything, but I mean, I showed up on Saturday morning instead of on Friday morning. And I ran into a famous philosopher and helped. She was the keynote speaker, and I helped her find the main building we were both looking for. So in some sense, I feel like I showed up late, and in another sense, I feel like I showed up right when I was supposed to, because I met somebody important through that process. I was at the right place at the right time, even though it may not seem like it. But again, I think I really enjoy dedicating time to going to conferences fully and attending them fully, and being present at them. And now that I have this GoPro, it's really easy for me to kind of sit down and record short summaries or thoughts or reflections along the way. So in the future, I'd probably do it that way instead of after the fact. But when I went back a few months ago, I was only recording my lectures through Zoom on my computer. So now, the paper I gave, I actually already included in my 1301 lecture, much like the Descartes paper, my 1301 seminar, much like the Descartes paper that I presented at the Pacific APA. For the New Mexico, Texas, I would say what I learned, but the paper I gave there was already part of my curriculum. So, and I've already recorded myself reading it in a different podcast episode, so I'm not going to read it again. I am also not going to read my commentator's comments out of respect for their privacy, although my commentator was fabulous. Really thoughtful comments and good questions, and helped kind of push past getting stuck at the level of meta-ethics that I was working at, and really pushing it into the applied consequences. I will say that something I clarified for my commentator was that there is no outside of affect. Affect is usually thought of as affects. The paper, I guess I can very briefly say, the paper was on Brian Matsumi's Politics of Affect, and it was a look at affection in the sense of affecting and being affected as a process that alters actual materiality as well as virtual capacity or power. And because Spinoza says that it is affecting and being affected along with the ideas of those things, or there is some like latency or like history or some sense in which the way that an object is actually affected changes what it can do in the future, so it changes its potentials too. So there's a multiplicity between, or there's an aspectual simultaneity, something that seems different but is really the same, between my affecting something else and it's affecting me, my affecting and my being affected, and it's affecting and it's being affected. So there's that aspectual simultaneity. But there's also a spectral simultaneity in Spinoza, therefore between self and other, and also between actual and virtual. The simultaneity between actual and virtual comes about through the way in which the actual transformations of things, like I said before, impacts the way in which they have potentials for further affection or further affect. And so when you're thinking about affect as all of these causes, actuality and potentiality, self-other simultaneity, you're really not thinking about happy, sad. There's a sense in which affect allows us to think more clearly about language as gestural, but that is also a misunderstanding of affect, to think of affect as just what my face looks like or what gestures I'm doing or the broader kind of paradigm or pattern with which I'm presenting or speaking. All of that is part of affect, but when I say there is no outside of affect, I mean you can't limit experience or perception or consciousness or anything, thoughts, anything, to not being affect. Affect is that which is the universal process. And by universal, I mean constantly differentiating, constantly different for everybody else. So yeah, that was one of the things I cleared up that may not have been clear in the paper when I gave the previous podcast. We're getting some nice overcast, and I'm really optimistic that the UV is going to drop some more. The UV is crazy here in New Mexico, so all you folks that come out to the NMTX from New Mexico, God bless you. Yeah, it's 6 now. Clouds are going to make it. It's going to go 5, 4, 3, as it goes 3, 4, 5, 3 to 5 p.m. Side note, not relevant, but I bought some, I have canned beans and canned corn that I brought camping with me, and I've heard about like corn, beans, and squash go good together. So I saw squash at the local general store. I went to the general store to get cooking oil for my cast iron because I forgot to get some. I forgot to bring some with me. Luckily, it was pre-seasoned, the cast iron, and yeah, I don't think it has room for all 3 of those things, but I might not warm the corn up, or I only have 1 cast iron, but I got 2 yellow crookneck squash, probably yay big each, yay big. I feel like it's a very Texas thing to say. So one of the easiest ways I describe affect to my students is like, okay, here's an example. I knew I had canned corns and canned beans and at the grocery store or at the general store. Oh, the general store is really cool. Let me take Winchester inside. He's right here sitting next to me. I'm all bundled up and covered from the UV, so only my hands and my face, and I have sunscreen on, so I'm not so upset about it, but I have to have him with me while we're doing this, just because, one, he needs to be in my possession in the sense of, he needs to be on my person in the sense of nobody can take him and I know he's safe and with me. Two, he's an assistance animal. Three, he needs to be under control for other people. So to prevent theft. Four, to make sure he's okay. He probably doesn't want to be alone. He's never away from me. Such a sweetheart. He's the best. He's part German Shepherd, part Golden Lab, part Labrador Retriever. Part Golden Retriever. He's part Golden. I think he's Golden Retriever and Labrador Retriever. And because I think Golden Labrador is a different thing. And Chow on his dad's side, and then there's ravens everywhere, guys. I've seen so many ravens here in New Mexico, and I love it. I love the ravens. You guys are awesome. You always got to make friends with your ravens. No, seriously, they know you, they remember you, and I think they're the coolest thing ever. If I would love to have not an army, sorry, I'm letting things slip. I would love to have a cadre of raven friends that if anything happened to me, they'd think that I was cool and help me out. Yeah. And they really will. They'll tell their friends about you. It's corvids in general. I think crows will do the same thing. I'm not sure if grackles look like crows, but I'm not sure if I don't think they're corvids. Anyway, you want to see the lake? I can show you the lake. We can just rotate for a minute. So as you can see, I mean, it would have this angle where we're at under the shade. There was not really any other. It's all cloudy now. Could probably get to where I want to go. Anyway, what else? The paper was also thinking about art and desubjectivization, kind of the point of self-world, self-other. Thinking about the self as dynamic because of affect. The world is dynamic. Yeah. So then after that, the rest of the conference, I was actually the first paper in my panel on the first day, and then he's staying on the roof now. He's really cool. I want to show him to you guys. I don't know if you can see him. He's at the top, way up there. Oh yeah, and now he's at the peak. Like, look at that. That's gotta, hopefully you can catch that. It's just like the most iconic photo I think I could imagine. I would shout like really nice things at the Raven very loudly if the mic wasn't on and it wouldn't like blast you guys' ears, y'all's ears. Raven, I think you're very, very cool. Come visit me. Just always gotta tell him. So after that, we had my panel. I can just tell you the rest of the things I did. Even over and beyond what I was was like scheduled to do at the conference, because I was scheduled for 3 roles, like I said. I've gone over the first role, including the comments I received and how I responded to them. I guess, I mean, a lot of the paper was discussing proto-linguistic things and a linguistic affect, or communication through perception. And so there's no outside of affect, like we said, but also, I guess that was in response to my commentator's question being, don't some affects require linguistic mediation, like love, or, I think love was the big one. And I think I just tried to explain the relationship, that language is a form of affect, but it's a specific, rarefied form that is inadequate often and not comprehensive. Not comprehensive for communicating the multidimensionality of experience or the world, and not comprehensive for communicating our experience of that multidimensionality, which can be, all sorts of things can happen to us and make it more complicated, right? What else? So then the person after me, they had a paper on some form of utilitarianism, I think, some kind of like specific problem in utilitarianism. And the person after them was giving a reading was doing something involving the democratic soul in Timaeus or Lysimachus, one of the Platonic dialogues. I took the envelope out of my folder, the folder out of my backpack, because I didn't have no room for it on the trip. But I'm not going to be back from camping before 90 days passes from the time the conference is, so I wanted to get these done. Okay, yeah. Their panels were cool. After that, some of the people that were in the panels, one of my old professors was there for the second and third panel. I don't think he saw mine, but he was an adjunct instructor at UHD. I think he's at HCC now. And I mean, I hung out with lots of people it was in San Marcos, which isn't far from Houston. And I hung out with lots of people from the Houston college system. I mean, Houston City College, Nathan Smith, and I think like 3 or 4, Brandon somebody. Some of them full-time, some of them adjunct. And then I met with Vanessa Voss at Lone Star University Park, although I think she said she's on sabbatical right now. Everybody was really, really warm and kind and good listeners and very willing to talk about their experiences and offer their insights. We talked a lot about, this was around the time that I think I had just finished all of my ADA compliance. And so I was explaining how if you have like uniquely generated materials that can't be easily cited, or like, actually, if you have uniquely generated materials that can't be easily scanned by the system, then what you can do instead is provide an alternate citation. And that's the easiest way. Like if you can't make your PDF scannable, or if you, like for example, I offer my students a clean PDF, which is scannable, but I also offer them an annotated PDF, which is a physical scan of physical handwriting on top of printed material. Or digital scan of physical handwriting on top of printed material. And the AI is not good enough to, thankfully, not good enough to neither read nor recreate that level of studying. or educational resource, right? And so I was like racking my brain trying to figure out how, because I was like trying to meet the deadline, and it got a lot simpler whenever I was able to add citations instead as an alternate format. And especially because the URL that I was able to provide is through my own website too, where I host those annotations for anybody that wants to use them, anybody that follows along with this podcast series or any of the YouTube lectures. Those annotations are actually linked in, if they exist, then those annotations are hyperlinked for podcast listeners in each episode as is relevant to the episode. And the guiding questions are in the description itself. So in the description is the guiding questions and then a hyperlink to those annotations. But yeah, I was like, I didn't want to get rid of those. So anyway, that was one of the things I shared with those colleagues over Friday night's dinner. And then Saturday night's dinner was different. But Friday afternoon, I think I went to the keynote. I can't remember. But immediately after my morning session, Friday morning, I went over to the room where they had like some lunch items. They didn't have sandwiches that day. They had sandwiches the next day. But that first day, they had like breakfast stuff still. I think it was lunch on your own. And Lone Star College provided lots of funding for. They provided funding for my Motel 6. I didn't stay at the conference hotel. I was able to get more days for a cheaper price at the Motel 6, and I brought Winchester with me without having to go through like ADA hassle. I also I had money for food, so I was able to eat really well between the conference and the university. The conference was on April 17th and 18th, and 19th was like the day that my hotel checked out, my last day of travel, so I got to travel on the 16th and the 19th. So it was a really nice experience where I left, whereas like I tried to do the North Texas like way too rushed. I tried to leave the day the conference was going, and like I think I might have had 2 nights of hotel and I came back Sunday. I think I did that because I had to have the car rental all weekend anyway because Enterprise wouldn't let me return it over the weekend. So it was going to be the same price. But like with the New Mexico, Texas conference, I didn't rush it. I got there the night before and I left the morning after for both days. So it was a 4-day thing. And it was really lovely to do it that way, and I really recommend it to anybody who wants to dedicate the time to it. The same that I would say about camping, or like hiking or visiting nature, or even doing philosophy. It's really, really gratifying if you are willing to invest the time in it. So I just wanted to thank Lone Star for how much food I was able to eat. Oh, and what I was going to say, the 16th through the 19th. The 19th, one of the reasons I was particularly grateful is the 19th is always, April 19th is a hard day for me every year. I have an ex-partner who passed away, went missing, and went missing during a police interaction, during a mental health crisis that was overly violent. Not on her part at all, but just the police trying to apprehend her. They were too aggressive and violent. And then she was just missing after that for 13 months. And April 19th is the day that her remains were found. So it's always a hard day of the year for me, and I was really grateful to have like one of the meals I had was a pancake flight, and it had 3 different pancakes, and one was like blueberry lemon, and it was like a seasonal one, And there was a seasonal one, a monthly one, and a year-round one. So like one that changed every month, one that changed every season, and one that changed. And the one for the month was like it had a donation cause or something. But one of them was chocolate chip with sprinkles and icing. And sprinkles were always kind of her thing. She loved like confetti and color. She was really skinny, and her family was really poor. So she had an extra appreciation for showmanship, I guess you'd say, and dazzle when there's not a lot to go around. She wanted a carnival-themed funeral, and so we did our best. But I didn't think too much about that during the conference itself. Just thought I'd say thank you and explain why it meant what it meant. The next day I moderated in the morning, a Saturday morning. I moderated a panel on Al-Farabi's metaphysics versus his politics, and the speaker's main argument. And I had also, I guess I'll say it, I'd also reviewed 7 papers for the New Mexico, Texas conference. So before ever coming there, I had read, I was familiar with all of the titles of the submissions because I had bid on which ones I was qualified to review. And then I was assigned 7 of those, 20 that I said I was qualified for. And then I reviewed them, and most of them made it in. Anyway, there were 2 that I said just too long. I couldn't. No, because you're just too long. It's a great paper, but it would take you 3 times more than a lot of time to present it. And actually, during the business meeting, Saturday evening, the society voted to, all present members voted to be strict about the word count. What it was supposed to do before was you can be slightly over for the conference, but you need to get it down to 3,000 if you're going to be in the journal. So the conference also publishes a journal of the best papers. And hopefully I think the Al-Farabi paper should go into that. So let's go back to that. But now they've changed the word count rule to be strictly 3,000 because we were getting insane things in the submissions. They were good papers, but they were articles. They weren't conference papers that could be delivered in 30 to 45 minutes. Anyway, 6,000 words instead of 3,000 words, twice the limit, or 9, right? The Al-Farabi argument was basically just that Al-Farabi is I think the argument was that Al-Farabi was an Aristotelian when it comes to politics, but a Neoplatonist when it comes to metaphysics. And that had some impacts on the directionality between metaphysical knowledge and political knowledge, meaning that political knowledge can't produce metaphysical knowledge, but it's necessary, it's produced by metaphysical knowledge. Instead, metaphysical knowledge produces physical knowledge, or political knowledge, or wisdom, or craft, or expertise, whatever word you want to use, or whatever moment you want to think about the excellence of politicking or the excellence of understanding God, right? Metaphysical knowledge being philosophy and Islam for Al-Farabi, but God, yeah. And there's some debate or question whether, we discussed as well that it may be the case that philosophy is a continuation of religion, for Al-Farabi especially, and that's the Neoplatonism, right, where God is the one or the absolute. And that's, I mean, Neoplatonism is kind of the basics of monotheism as far as I can tell. That's probably not true. That's not true, but I mean, like, okay, that's really complicated to say, because Neoplatonism comes after, like, Jesus, even, for example, but the theological doctrine that we've interpreted, we get from the medieval scholastics who got there, because we lost Plato and Aristotle, but the Islamic philosophers and religious philosophers had Aristotle and Plato still. And so, but they're obviously not giving us just any Plato and Aristotle. They're giving us the specific way they read Plato and Aristotle, and the specific. And so, actually, if Neoplatonism does influence Christianity and Judaism, then it's only through passing through Islam, which I always find really wholesome, like holistic, I guess. Anyway. So that was a really good session. I've worked with Al-Farabi before. I did it during my mentor who taught me Spinoza was also a scholar in medieval Jewish and Islamic philosophy. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to say that. Because I'm just thinking like Avicenna, Averroes, Al-Farabi, Maimonides. Afterwards was a paper by a young master's student that I really enjoyed. That paper was about Plato. It was called Plato's Late Ontology of Language. And one of the things we got to do was consider the relationship between naming and the relationship between naming, intentionality, and exemplary likeness. And I forget the main line of the argument, and that's fine, because I don't have, this person probably would not want me disclosing their argument. I know them. I knew them last year. I met them at the last year's conference. And they're going to work on this in a little while. They've got other things on their plate right now. But it was really, I really enjoyed that. One of the things we tried, because we're trying to think about communicating understanding to other people through this, the use of language to communicate the forms in some sense. And the question was, well, they argued at one point, they answered a question at one point and said, they don't think it's necessary to have in their mind the actual understanding, the present, genuine understanding, in order to name or communicate a likeness. You could make accidental namings or likenesses. And I thought, and I was arguing, I was like, I really don't think you can. I think that if you were to compare the accidental naming and likeness, which can happen, with the naming and likeness given when you are being intentional about it and have it present in mind, and have a full understanding of yourself that you are trying to convey, that you're having that noetic experience yourself, that either that's always there, or if you're just roboting it without that being there, the one where it's there actually does communicate more, and the naming or the language or the communication is a greater exemplary likeness to the form. One really interesting thing I liked working with this scholar, this philosopher, is that they're a pragmatist, and so they're a Plato scholar that's also pragmatic, and they're so pragmatic they didn't even want to they were kind of fighting with me last year about the OG pragmatists, and they're like, no, just read Putnam, and Putnam has everything you need, because recent pragmatism does just try to keep it simple, and there's no need to go through a philological or historical or historiographic method. After that paper, on Plato's late ontology of language in the Timaeus. And I think that scholar was comparing two different texts where Plato seemed to have competing claims. And I think one of the things was like, on the one hand, Plato is using like metaphorical language, and on the other hand, he's using very specific language. And so they're not really in contradiction with each other, but they communicate or reveal or disclose different aspects of the overarching exemplary likeness of the pure language of being or truth or understanding or whatever. Pure language is a term from Walter Benjamin. He says the task of the translator is to reveal the flux of pure language in each new translation, kind of like trying to get past semantic drift and keep the revelations and like the height of the aesthetic height of experience and understanding, the peak of henosis, that the wonder or the majesty of revelation, of the divinity of the experience. I guess that's what pure language is. And I'd say that like becomes difficult depending on which experiences you have. We did a lecture series on Of Divine Places. I'd say John Lignanzi is addressing the same concern about like God being harder to find, or divinity religious experiences or divinity being harder to find as one ages, or as the ages have gone on. Anyway, after the Plato paper, the third paper that morning was really cool. I kind of understood this, but didn't really. It was about Aristotelian hylomorphism, but specifically it was about, it's called Actual Parts, What Aristotle Saw and Reid Missed. And I guess Reid is somebody from the modern period, and this scholar was comparing I already talked about this a little bit in one of the other episodes. I can't remember. I think it was the episode on the NTPA. But it was the idea that, so mereological potentialism. Mereology is the study of part-whole relations. I'll say it again. Part-whole relations, like fractions, or how does the leg of a chair relate to the seat of the chair, and how is a leg both a part and a whole at the same time? When we call it a leg, it's a whole, but it's also a part of something else. And what is the relationship between parts? How do edges occur? What are edges? How does self-other occur? How does differentiation occur? All of these things have to be related to questions of mereology. And this person's argument is that actually there's just one in hylomorphism for Aristotle, and in this view, the whole of nature is irreducibly simple. It's one, not really flat, but like almost phenomenological. But the parts that constitute it are irreducibly complex, such that you could provide attention to any subsection of the whole, and it could seemingly fill up a new whole. This is probably less, because the philosopher's main argument, the scholar's main argument, was that there are only multiple parts potentially, but at any given moment in the dynamic flow of change, there is one thing changing constantly. The example they gave was like a block of granite that could become a statue of David or a statue of Michael, but it can't become both. And at any given instant, so the imagination is multiple, or the potentiality or the virtue of the reality of the real is multiple, or the material of the virtue of the material is multiple. But the material itself has to be unified in one. And the edge from, there's something I can lift up. The edge from the hoodie to my skin is less mediated because it's in such close proximity right now, but it's not any less contiguous. No matter if I were to throw it, Hawaii and Alaska are contiguous with the rest of the United States. They just have other things between them that they're also contiguous with. So there's some notion of contiguity without any separation of parts, but where this one simple whole, this is what's so mystical, this one simple whole is constituted by such irreducibly complex things at the quantum level that we can never generate predictable laws that ultimately would forcibly be held to. I mean, we have these general laws. James talks about the lack of laws. William James, early 1900s, 1903 or 4, maybe 1901. And Donald Davidson, mental events. And I mentioned Davidson to the scholar who was working on Plato, and he was like, I just read mental events. And I was like, yes, mental events is great. Davidson argues that reality may follow laws without those laws being translatable or intelligible to the mind. And this allows for a relationship between mind-body that is not like deontological or formally legalistic or not universal. It's not deterministic in one way or the other, necessarily. There could be laws that are yet not determining laws, or something like that. I think the main thing for Donaldson was that you can have laws that aren't, how do I put it? How do I normally put it? I teach Plato this way, I teach Kant this way when they talk about law. Codifiable. You can't codify the law. And that's what you try to do in a legal system, is codify what's right and wrong, what should and shouldn't be done. That's what you try to do in a scientific system, to codify how you can control and predict the world. But the world may move in generally patterned ways without there being any strict legalism to it. So after that, I also gave comments on a paper later in the afternoon. I went to lunch first. I had lunch at the conference. Lunch, one of the days, either Friday or Saturday, I talked about Buddhism and Neoplatonism. I think maybe Stoicism too, with a student and a teacher who would come out there at one of the schools, from one of the schools, I don't remember which one. I thought that was cool. Teacher got funding, obviously, to go and was presenting. The student wasn't presenting, but just was thinking about getting their master's. Really cool guys. Yeah, I can't remember. I think they were talking about mostly Neoplatonism, and they were mentioning like the Enneads, and they were reading them together or something. We might have talked about other Asian religions like Taoism or something. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, I think we came to this idea of like the one as being the teacher in life. Like all of reality is an experience of being taught and trying to improve and be better. And this was my way of combining Neoplatonism with Buddhism, where in Buddhism you have many teachers, like one vehicle, many teachers, or one teacher, many means. And I was getting this sense of like God or the one as being this constant teaching presence. So they really resonated with that. sort of Neoplatonic Buddhism in that sense. Because you can say Neoplatonic Buddhism and not get the sense of like a sort of deistic teacher who's actively playing in the world with you. And in a sense that carries across experiences. Again, Jean-Luc Nancy has the notion of a romance, an affair with the origin, where each new person is a different access to the origin. And so we all have different existential situations, different explanations for those existential situations, and different histories that lead to different explanations. And so we have things to teach each other about existence, the origin of existence, and the nature of life and the meaning of life for Jean-Luc Nancy. And that's kind of what I mean too, is that there's this, so we don't even have to keep it as God. I mean, if you want to, like with Nancy, there is no God, you might have the origin still, or you might have being still, but that is very scattered in different people, and it's a task left to us. We are not saved. It's a task left to us to save each other, for Jean-Luc Nancy, and that's very different than thinking that you are guaranteed by a metaphysical reality that will always keep you safe. And from this side of the curtain, I don't think you can test which way it goes, if you're always safe or if it's scattered and split. Later in the day, I gave comments on a paper, an author trying to develop a notion of a worldview, and I thought that they thought that a worldview was something different from a belief. They thought it was a consistent, stable belief that was genuinely held and that helped people make decisions. And I took issue with some of those things, like the fact that a worldview needed to be stable, or that it needs to be genuinely held. And I think that there are like people who work on worlding, like Lugones, who says that she feels most at home with other world travelers and other people who are in between worlds. People who think of themselves as being in between people, who don't think of themselves as discrete people, but always understand themselves as mixtures with 20 different people or hundreds of different people. This goes to something Lugones calls kernel separation instead of purity separation, where purity separation involves like folding away other people to not think of them as involved in the co-constitution of our different identities. She emphasizes how we're different people in different worlds, different people with different friends, different people with different colleagues or colonizers or hostile people, right? Different people in different worlds, and those worlds are not all friendly. And so the worldview that is stable and consistent is a very privileged thing, but to throw around the word privilege really triggers some people and makes them stop listening. What I mean is that they've never had the friction to understand, and they really, so just earlier that day, my comments didn't involve this, but earlier that day, somebody gave a paper from Texas State University, gave a paper on Mexican Dasein, that's what it's called, but a notion of the accident as being more primary than the fundamental or the substance. So Dasein is this thing that is unshaking, and it's not just being towards death that is faulty, but the Mexican Dasein is more constantly in this relation towards instability. And I think it was called like Zobrazo or something like that. I really enjoyed this paper too. I thought they were right as well. But it's an example of like, a worldview does not need to be consistent or stable. I don't need to be expected to be the same person when I'm being treated one way versus the other. I don't need to be expected to be the same person when I'm being attacked versus whenever I'm relaxing with my family. I don't need to be expected to be the same person whenever I'm trying to accomplish one philosophical task versus another. I don't need Foucault says something like, "Let the bureaucrats worry that our papers are in order. Do not ask me who I am, and do not expect me to remain the same when I am writing." Foucault says that. It's a really great quote. So, I mean, I just took issue with her paper, but well, I think what I failed to do was restate her argument carefully first and then more carefully explain the different reasons why I took issue with it. It seemed like the things I was concerned about were not being addressed. And everybody else in the room seemed really on board with the paper. So I imagine there were similar blind spots in the other philosophers in the room. I felt a little bit out of place at that moment. And I also felt bad that I didn't want to be hurtful to the author, and I didn't want to be dismissive of their position. But again, yeah, I really felt like their definition was very limited, and in some cases, if used as a prescriptive measure of what rational worldviews are, I didn't think it was right at all. I thought it was very dismissive of all sorts of ways of living. We had the business meeting. There were 2 elections. I nominated myself for both of them, and I wasn't. One of them was really close, but I didn't vote for myself in either one. I nominated myself, but I voted for the other person each time. The second vote, we had to do a closed ballot where people put their votes in a hat instead of raising their hand, and that one I did not win. And that's fine, although I think that one was for the one that I actually wanted, which was like director at large, and I think that one just meant that I did extra reviews if I needed to. So one of the positions was like a fifth. No, director at large was like the tiebreaker vote, and then executive director or something. Because there's president. Yeah, I think executive director was just like somebody who does lots of reviews for the conference, for the journal. There's extra things at the last minute when needed, which like is kind of my bag, but I don't know. I'm really busy anyway. It's cool. So that's pretty much the conference. That's what happened. I learned, like I said, Texas State was beautiful, or the campus was beautiful. It was like really high up. There was a lot of steps, a lot of elevation difference. I was not expecting. I don't think I'd ever been to San Marcos. I didn't know Texas had areas that steep. I mean, like. It's more drastic than some of the views I'm getting out here. But like a lot of steps, I'd say not as much. When I lived in Brooklyn, I did 16 flights of stairs a day between the subway and, let's see, I took maybe like 2 or 3 flights at my transfer, and then I think like 2 flights down from the elevated train, which is the one that goes over the street. But I did. My phone says I did 16 flights, and then my classroom. My school was on the 3rd and 1st floor of a shared building, of a shared school. The 2nd floor was a high school, and the 1st floor was a D75 school, which in New York, that's for extensive special needs. Those are students who have like a teacher would have 1 or 2 students. I worked in a 12-to-1 when I taught 6th grade. I worked in an ICT classroom where we had 45 students first. I taught 4th grade the year before, but when I taught 6th grade, we started with ICT classrooms with 45 students, and eventually we got a 4th section, so we were able to move 30 of those students out into a 4th section. There were 30 section students with 2 teachers. That's what an ICT means, is integrated code teachers. There's 2 teachers in the classroom. In some cases, they even ended up getting a 3rd teacher. When I taught 4th grade, I was the 3rd teacher. I think I was put in the classroom that was the worst performing 4th grade classroom in the entire school network. One of our students had... Hey, everyone. The GoPro died. I don't think we missed much. But yeah, I was just saying that in the 4th and 6th grade classroom, we had students who had IEPs, individualized education plans, and I eventually taught in a 12 to 1, which meant a 12 to 1 to 1, which meant that you should have no more than 12 students, 1 teacher, and 1 paraprofessional. We had 2 teachers and 12 students, and at first we had 5 students, then we had 4, then we had 5 again, and that 5th one who came in later, he had a paraprofessional. We didn't have a paraprofessional before that, I don't think. I think we had 6. We might have had 6 at one point. I can't remember. And some of them came and left. They went to other schools in the New York system that we didn't, even though it was a 12 to 1, we didn't have. It took many months over the school year for myself and my other co-teacher, who was from Oklahoma and New Jersey. It took many months for us to carve out certain ways that the students got what they were legally protected and deserved to get in the classroom. The administrators were, even though they used to be teachers themselves, were not always, if there's a scale where you can lean towards foot on the pedal, like get more done and like suffer if necessary, versus like be flexible and adaptive and listen when needed, the administrators are usually always on that side. Now I've seen that. I've worked in vastly different school systems, and the best ones are when the administrators do not work like that. 4th grade was not like that. I think we had a principal who taught like 8th grade, so he moved on to teaching, being a principal for a high school. Just expected too much from 5th through 7th in the middle school. And the assistant principal was, he had taught 6th grade, but he was also, I think he was a grade team lead his first year teaching 6th grade, and he was just really perfunctory and kind of, I don't think he left the students enough room to develop and flourish as human beings, which is something different from somebody who can do well on a state test. Just too sit up straight, always stare at the teacher, no disrespect whatsoever, no sucking teeth. I mean, he proudly wore the scary vice principal label, and he got feedback about like trying to be nicer. So, I mean, I also got feedback about like whenever I would tell students things, I sounded harsher than I needed to. So, all sorts of lessons that I've learned teaching over the years. And then at dinner, I got to have a meal. I had lunch Friday or Saturday with that professor that I used to learn from. And then I also had dinner with them both nights. It was just a good experience overall. And yeah, I was really grateful for everybody involved, really grateful for everybody's patience. At each of the dinners, I was able to learn and listen to other people's experiences and ask questions and talk about my own experiences teaching. From people in different states, mostly in the U.S. Southwest, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California, I think, too. I think one of the people on the committee is from California. So, all right, you guys. I'm not sure what else to say from here, and I think we're coming up close to the hour mark, so I want to cut it anyway. But I hope you enjoyed hearing about the conference, and I hope you learned about what you should expect attending a conference. I would say also what I learned from the Pacific APA that I forgot to mention in that video is that, like, if I'm going to be in a workshop, then I'm going to be, there's an ant on my glass. I thought I was seeing something in my glasses. One of the lenses of my glasses. If you're going to be at a workshop, like, that means that if you are preparing material, then people are going to give you feedback. But if you're attending the workshop, in some cases you may be expected to give feedback on the presenter, and you may be expected to prepare that feedback beforehand. I attended the Philosophy of Race workshop at the North Texas Philosophical Association as well. And I had the material beforehand, but I was not expected to. I contributed what I could on the spot, but I was not expected to prepare anything. With the Descartes workshop at the Pacific APA, I was kind of expected to prepare something, but there were circumstances surrounding why I couldn't, that I didn't properly account for. And yeah, just like, if I had been thinking of that a workshop is not just where I present a paper, but it's also where I give feedback to other people, I would have gone into it with a better mindset, with a proper mindset. And I don't know, I was thinking, like, why did I not know that? Why did I not expect a workshop to be a workshop? But it's like, I never did a workshop in grad school. I've never really been to one before. You do a lot of workshopping if you're like a fine arts student, like a master's of fine arts. If you're a poetry or an English lit master's of fine arts, like, a lot of your classes will involve workshops, which is where you present work and give feedback on it. But like, I just never did a workshop. So I would say, too, if you've never done a workshop before, then know that you're supposed to also try to give feedback to other people too, not just receive feedback, but give feedback. And just be a I would want to be a respectful participant, which means, like, dedicate time to it, and like, not be so hung up on just trying to fill all the check boxes that I don't experience it as a shared living time in my life that is gone. That is what it is. So thank you guys. I hope this didn't go over, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Melissa, again, for the funding. Thank you to all the colleagues who taught me anything, and y'all take care. Bye.